Hi, I'm Dr. Hackie Reitman of differentbrains.org, and I was just interviewed for the Keith Andrew Network. And Keith Andrew, keep up the good work. You're an inspiration.
Episode 561. I am your host, Keith Andrew, and you're watching the one and only Keith Andrew Network. Today I have a very special guest, Hackie Reitman. I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my talk show.
Thanks for having me.
No, the honor's all mine. For people who want to know what my talk show is about, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. It's to prove to them to stem out to something. So hashtag break the labels. With that being said, it's a half hour, 33 minutes of your time. And let's just have fun with it. I'm going to push on you. You can push back. Ask me anything you want. And for our viewers who want to know why is the set always changing, I'm trying to look for that certain look. Trying to keep it basic, but also trying to make it look fancy at the same time. So I'm always changing it. But with that being said, and the first question I was going to ask you is, you're a founder of your own company. How many years have you been a founder, and who influenced you to become a founder?
Well, this has been a very different company now. I've been very lucky in my life. I've been in many different walks of life and founded different companies. The present and most important company is differentbrains.org, which is a neurodiversity advocacy website, because society needs to understand and embrace neurodiversity for the benefit of all of us, because all of our brains are different. And we want to get rid of the stigma of having different brains. And as my friend Temple Grandin says in one of her books, different, not less.
No, I agree with you. You know, people always say to me, after say, oh, I have a learning disability. Huh? Well, you seem normal to me. And I always joke, like, yeah, I put a good mask on. But just because you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not fair. It's like the big elephant in the room. Just because you don't see it, then it's not because... Let me rephrase that. It's like the big elephant in the room. Just because you don't see it, you kind of know it's there. People like to see, oh, he's missing an arm, he's missing a leg. Okay, he has a disability. But if you're like you and me, where we can talk and do whatever, they think you're bullshitting and you're just trying to put a face on. So people like to feel and touch things, but at the same time, when you have a disability, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
And we want to get people in all walks of life, whether they're educators or employers or teachers or police or you name it. We want them to look through the prism of everybody's brain's a little different. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just different, okay? And once we start looking through that prism and say, okay, we want to help each other maximize our potential for happiness, health, productivity, and satisfaction, then things get a lot easier, you know? Once you look through that prism, instead of through the prism of one size fits all, which it's not. As my daughter is so fond of saying to me, and as we have on the cover of our Asperger's book, that brains are like snowflakes. Brains are like snowflakes. No two are alike. My brain's different from yours. Doesn't mean it's any better. It's just different.
No, absolutely. And what's the magazine your daughter's on?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, you mentioned your daughter was on a magazine.
No, she's. It's on the front cover of our book, a quote from her.
Oh, nice.
The Asper Tools, the practical guide to understanding and embracing Asperger's, autism, and neurodiversity, which was published by HCI Books, who did Chicken Soup for the Soul.
And how can people find your book?
They can find our book by going to aspertools.com or on our website, differentbrains.org. I think we have it, although I'm not sure, to be honest with you. And if you also Google Aspertools, plural, you'll find it as well. Or you can Google me, Hackie Reitman, MD.
No, absolutely. Now, the next question I was going to ask you is what caught my interest, because you mentioned you're a founder, author, filmmaker, and former surgeon, but one of the things that's really stand out is you are a former heavyweight boxer.
Yes, I had 26 pro heavyweight fights, which I started amateur when I was in my first year of medical school at Boston University, where I was lucky enough to win the New England Heavyweight Golden Gloves Championship. I got offered a $100,000 pro signing bonus in 1971 if I would go pro and quit medical school, which of course I didn't want to do. And then I had a 17-year layoff when, for personal reasons, I got back in the ring at age 38 and was donating all the purses to different children's charities, and I ended up with a pro heavyweight career of 13 wins, 7 losses, and 6 draws. I was once ranked number 12 in the IBC for about 10 minutes, and then I got killed twice on national TV. So, and my last 10 rounder was when I was 52 years old.
Now, let me ask you, all the patients you ever had, because you mentioned you are a former surgeon, all those former patients you have, were those the ones you beat the crap out of and gave like concussions to? Is that how you get so many patients?
No, I was an orthopedic surgeon, so unless they had orthopedic injuries, which paradoxically in boxing, except for brain injuries and cuts and things like that and broken noses, there's not a lot of orthopedic injuries in boxing. But I had a good career, and I was always careful to keep it separate. I was professional in orthopedic surgery. I taught for 30 years, commuting from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, up to my alma mater, Boston University School of Medicine, where I would give the first-year medical students their lectures in clinical anatomy of the upper extremity for 30 years. And I had a good run both as an orthopedic surgeon and as a professional heavyweight boxer, which gave me access. When I had my 10 seconds of fame with Good Morning America and Roy Firestone and New York Times, it was a good story. And I actually got to meet with the then President of the United States, President George H. Bush, the father, and his wife Barbara, to discuss children's issues, as I was always a children's advocate.
No, absolutely. I still think it's funny, though. You could have combined beating the crap out of your patients. Like, this is what happens when you don't go see me. Now they have medical this, and it's like, okay, now we'll go see you. So I guess it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Well, I don't know about that, but we'll go on to the next question.
Now, the next one I was going to ask you is, how many years have you been a former surgeon, and what made you want to become a former surgeon?
Well, I was very lucky because my folks had a gas station in Jersey City, where I grew up in the 50s, and we had a great family physician, Dr. Hyman Aronoff, and he was just great. He would walk in with his black bag into your home, and you would just feel better just having him walk in. And I rode away to the AMA when I was 12 years old. I still remember writing to the address at that time was, I think, 521 Dearborn Street in Chicago. And I said, look, I want to become a physician, and I don't want to have to go to high school and everything. Let's hurry this up. And in those days, there was no internet or anything. They sent me back these big catalogs and lists of medical schools, and then 4 of them in those days had accelerated 6-year medical programs, and I liked the Boston University one, where I was lucky enough, even though I had gotten expelled in the 1st grade and the 10th grade, I was lucky enough to be accepted and get my medical degree at Boston University, where I also did my orthopedic surgical residency.
Oh, that's really nice. And going back to your college years, what did you major in? And does
Well,
that... Oh, go ahead.
I was in a special program called the 6-year medical program, where basically you got accepted into medical school right out of high school. But in those 2 years and utilizing summers, you got just as many credits. And I actually took a lot of literature and Russian literature and English literature and writing and those kind of courses. And that was kind of my minor, because it was a science degree combined with a Bachelor of Arts with an MD. So it was all kind of wrapped into one. But I always loved writing, and in later years, as you know, I wrote the Aspertools book, and I wrote about 6 screenplays, one of which we made into the movie The Square Root of Two, starring Darby Stanfield from Scandal, which has an interesting story behind it as well.
No, absolutely. And I know I was looking at your company. I would love to have everyone on the show if that's a possibility.
Whatever we can do to help you with your show, we're glad to do it. We were really glad to help you, because I really admire what you're doing as well, and you're taking your strengths and your positives and your energy, and you're doing something positive. And we at differentbrains.org feel very strongly about positive. That's why I wrote the Aspertools book. What are some of the tools we can all use with our brains a little bit different? And all of our brains are a little bit different. I don't care what our labels are. And sure, things that they don't cost anything either. You can eat a good, healthy Mediterranean-style diet. You can get regular exercise. You can use a checklist. All of these things make a lot of sense for any of us with any kind of brain.
No, absolutely. Now, my next question I was going to ask you is, who were some of your favorite people you ever got the chance to work with? And have you ever worked with any famous people?
Well, it depends on what walk of life you're talking, because let's talk about in surgery. I was so lucky I got to scrub with some of the greatest surgeons in history going way back. I actually got to scrub in surgery with the man who invented total hips, Mr. John Charnley from England. And in England, you didn't call them doctors, you call them misters. And we got to scrub together way back in the early 70s when total hips were a brand new thing. They were just discovered in 1964. Some of my greatest mentors in surgery were Dr. David Siegel, Dr. Robert E. Leach. Now, if you move over to, in no particular order, teaching, one of my greatest mentors was Dr. William F. McNary, who was our anatomy teacher, and Elizabeth Moyer, may they both rest in peace, were terrific. If you move over to the boxing world, I have actually, going back to 1971, up through my retirement from boxing in 2004, or 2002 rather, I got to spar with 38 world champions, the best of the best, and get in the ring with them. And that was like amazing. One of them, 5-time world champion Roberto Duran, I was in a public exhibition with him to raise some money too for a charity, and it was so popular on the undercard, they had 2 championship fights, and he gave me a good beating that night, but it was an exhibition because I was a heavyweight, and he had just won the year before the middleweight championship, and he had been a lightweight champion, welterweight champion, the great champion Roberto Duran. And at the press conference, him being from Panama, he spoke mainly Spanish. The Spanish media here in South Florida went crazy. Telemundo, Univision, everything. And they were, when we were up on the dais at the press conference, they said, "Dr. Reitman, why are you smiling? He's gonna beat you pretty good." And I said, "Listen, this is like getting to play baseball with Babe Ruth. It's like, who am I to get into a ring with the great Roberto Duran?" And it was very thrilling. And I've gotten it. And now in what I'm doing now at differentbrains.org, I mean, who am I to be a featured speaker along with Temple Grandin, who's like the Elvis of autism, and people like Stephen Shore. And I'll be speaking out at the United States Autism Conference in Las Vegas the end of this month. And I spoke down at the National Down Syndrome Society's first ever adult summit on Down syndrome. And the reason it was the first ever was people with Down syndrome in the 1980s only used to live to their 20s. Now they live till 60. So now there's more issues. And what I'm finding, Keith, is that no matter what kind of brain you or I have, or anybody has, there are certain things that are good for all of our brains. One of the most important things and underrated things is socialization. Strong social relationships, families, friends, at work, being around people, getting out there. And for many of us, it's very hard to do that. But that's one of the most important things. Being alone is not a good thing. So whatever you can do to be with other good people, that's a great thing to do.
No, absolutely. And if it's a possibility, I would love to work with you.
Sure. We have remote volunteers, and we have, what we like to do is, and we have a documentary in progress. I've already made one documentary, which your viewers and my viewers can see free of charge on differentbrains.org. You can watch it. It's called Asperger's Autism and the Square Root of Two, a neurodiversity documentary, because when I made the Square Root of Two movie inspired by my daughter's challenges going to college, I had no idea that she had Asperger's and was on the spectrum. And she had 23 brain tumors, had 2 major brain surgeries, was doing well. Her brain was a little bit different, and she ran into some challenges as she was getting her discrete mathematics degree from Georgia Tech. And after she graduated, I wrote, produced, and directed The Square Root of Two, starring Darby Stanfield from Scandal, which is a G-rated movie and family-friendly, about a young girl going to college, overcoming challenges. And but then afterwards, my daughter Rebecca started interning at Cumberland Academy of Georgia, and the owner of the school said, "Hey, your daughter's tutoring kids with Asperger's and autism. Did you know that your daughter has Asperger's?" And me, being a brilliant MD, said, "What's that?" So, well, it's on the spectrum of autism. And I said, "What's that?" And I held up release of the movie because I figured I should figure out, Keith, what the movie was about. And then, in researching for a couple of years, I then had my epiphany about all different brains. And I wrote the book Asper Tools, The Practical Guide to Understanding and Embracing Asperger's Autism and Neurodiversity, because by then I knew that all of our brains are different. And HCI Books, who did Chicken Soup for the Soul, to my surprise, gave me a contract, but on the provision I would not release the movie for a couple of years because they said, "Hackie, your story is confusing everybody." And then I started differentbrains.org, which I'm very proud of, and I'm proud of all of our neurodiverse interns and volunteers, both down here in Fort Lauderdale and remotely, all over the country, who are helping produce all the media, all of our blog articles, all of our Exploring Different Brains, 170 interviews with world neurodiversity leaders. We have the podcast Spectrumly Speaking by Becca Laurie, who herself was not diagnosed with Asperger's and autism until she was in her 30s, and Dr. Kate Cody. And that's female-oriented because females get the short end of the stick in this whole deal. Many of them don't get diagnosed till their 30s, and it's a bit tougher on them. And we have many different features, all free, on differentbrains.org, and we're trying to network all the different silos. PTSD people over here, the Alzheimer's resources over there, autism, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, mental health, neurological, Parkinson's, developmental and intellectual, and then our learning differences, dyslexia, ADHD, you name it. And look at you. You are a great example of harnessing your strengths and your hyper interests to make a positive impact and help others.
No, I agree with you. Now, the one thing I do want to say before we go to the commercial break, we should change the name autism, because everyone says Asperger's, and I'm like, well, I did like burgers, but somehow it's turning me off. Why you want to have ass on your burgers? And who even came up with that?
Well, actually, historically, there's a very interesting history. I don't know if you want to go into it now, but the Dr. Asperger who first described it was himself with the Nazis in Germany. So I don't know
so
that
he was
like
an ass.
So there's an interesting history, but officially they did away with the name as far as the official listings, and it's on the spectrum of autism as far as official listings. Myself, I think labels are a lousy way to describe a human being. I think when I meet a guy like you, like Keith Andrew, I got to say, I got to tune in on your brain, and you have a unique brain, and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and how can I help you achieve your goals, and how can you help me achieve my goals, and how can you go out and make a living, and how can you strengthen where you might be weak. All those are positive, fun things, you know, and it does not have to be all with a negative stigma or things like that. And, that's how I look at it.
No, absolutely. Now we're going to take a quick commercial break, and I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and with the remaining time, I'll pass it over to you.
Vanessa Lina, Asian Lalo. This is Cynthia Bass today. I'm Sonia Fisher. This is Shane Smith. My name is Alexandra Bowie. My name is Amelia Clover. Hi, I'm Amy Linden.
Hi, I'm Nicole Brown.
Meg Green.
Hi, my name is Asata Caldwell. Hi, everybody, I'm Brooke from
Hi, I'm Brynford.
Hi, I'm Casey Dunn.
Hi, it's Cassandra Kavinsky.
Hi, I'm Christina Frieza.
I'm Cindy Hogan. I'm Courtney Sinello. Hi, I'm Daisy.
My name is Deborah Jane East.
Hi, my name is Danielle Marcia.
Hi, everyone, I'm Victoria London.
Hi, I'm Heather Crona. Hi, I'm Heather Callahan Stevens.
Hi, I'm J. Nicole Ralph.
My name is Jamie Patrell. My name is Turi. My name is Julia Brenkovich.
Kathleen Wills.
Kimberly Amato.
Hi, my name is Laura Putton.
Hi, I'm Laura Chapanis.
Hi, everyone, I'm Melissa Damas.
This is Michelle Mupo, a.k.a. Fuchsia. I'm Rachel Rivera.
Hi, my name is Sarah Joy Mount.
Hi, I'm Susan Brender.
Hi, everyone, this is Venus Leone.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Tanner.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Herrera, and I was just on the Keith Andrew Network. It was tons of fun. We used up all our time and then some. I really recommend this show, and try to be a guest on Keith's show. It was super fun.
Welcome back from the commercial break. First thing I'm going to ask you is social media, with everything you accomplish, from being a founder, book author, filmmaker, heavyweight boxer, and former surgeon. Do you think social media plays a big part in people working with you and getting yourself recognized, or do you think it's just there to make noise?
That's a very good question. Social media, whether we like it or not, is here, and it's big, and it's growing, okay? I'm kind of ignorant regarding social media. I'm not stupid, although opinions can vary, but when I say ignorant, some of our wonderful neurodiverse interns are handling our social media, Twitter, Facebook, things like that. The only social media I do myself, which I enjoy very much, is LinkedIn, because I meet so many people in this arena, one way or the other, in the brain and neurodiversity and learning differences arena. It's good, and I enjoy that. The social media is a double-edged sword, as all publicity really is, and all methods of communication. I have to say, being as old as I am, I'm 68 years old now, I remember when there wasn't the social media and there weren't even computers and the internet really to speak of. And it was all the newspapers and TV and radio, and that was it. And that was your source of information. And word got around pretty quick. And if you look back at the history of communication, it's amazing how human beings have been able to communicate for century after century after century, no matter how much or how little technology they've had available.
No, I agree with you. Now, the next question I was going to ask you is, what were some of your favorite books that you ever wrote, and what were some of your favorite films you ever produced?
Is the question what books I've read or what books I've written?
Written.
Well, the only book a published book that I've written is Asper Tools, A Practical Guide to Understanding and Embracing Asperger's Autism and Neurodiversity, published by HCI Books, which is on Amazon and all the usual places. I've written 6 screenplays, only one of which has gotten made into the movie, the Square Root of 2 movie. I have done lots of other writing, articles, and I've been published in various places and things. I am working on another book on Alzheimer's as we speak now. And I think the way media is changing, more things like the interview you're doing right now, and more of the short film clips as media changes. The 170 interviews with world neurodiversity leaders that I've done on exploring different brains, available free of charge on our website at differentbrains.org. That's been a big thrill, and then we cut them down into clips and short versions. Books. I hope to be writing more books, but we'll see how time goes.
What about films? What was your favorite film you ever produced, and is there any more in the projects? Maybe you like to do one about me.
Well, you're a very inspirational character, and you certainly were worthy of one. The Square Root of 2, starring Darby Stansfield from Scandal, which you can find at the squareroot2movie.com. Also, a documentary that can be viewed free of charge at differentbrains.org. If you want to purchase a copy of it, DVD or download, you can do that too. Asperger's Autism and the Square Root of 2, a neurodiversity documentary. We have another documentary of which I was a co-executive producer, was a boxing one released by Epix, and that was Foreman. That's the George Foreman boxing story. Another documentary I've been working on for 20 years that's still in development is Angelo Dundee, who was the cornerman and boxing trainer and manager for 15 world champions, and Angelo Dundee and Muhammad Ali, one of the great heavyweight champions. And I'm also working on a book on that. We have a new documentary in development called, working title is In Their Own Voice, which I hope you'll be part of, and we hope to interview you, which instead of so much having so-called experts talking about it, we're having the people themselves whose brains are a bit different. We've interviewed about 40 different autistic individuals in various walks of life, that's going to be one. But we've also interviewed so many people, just like our interns. We're so proud of our interns to do a great job. And if you want to look at labels, which I ask people not to get stuck on, we've got them all. We've got one intern who's got severe OCD and ADHD, who now has had a full-time job for about a year out with Comcast, who's doing just great and still volunteering for us. We have a gal who's a bipolar, manic depressive binge eater, who's producing is writing a one-woman Broadway play on what it's like to have her different kind of brains while she works full-time and still volunteers for us. in the Week in Neurodiversity, which we cover all of the highlights that week in the media in neurodiversity. We have an autistic young man who's about 10 times smarter than I'll ever be, who just gave his 2-week notice because he's got a full-time job out in the private sector. And the list goes on, and with all different kinds of people, all different kinds of brains, but they have one thing in common. They've taken a positive approach. They want to help other people. They've chosen to help out differentbrains.org, and they're moving forward in a positive way with their lives.
No, absolutely. Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air, but wrapping up, it's the last 4 minutes and counting. Was there anything you wanted to ask me? Anything you wanted to promote? This is your time.
I wanted to ask you, when were you first diagnosed with autism?
I don't think I have autism.
Okay, tell me how you see your different brain.
All right. Let's see. I was labeled. I found out this when I got my high school folder. I was labeled mentally disturbed, mentally disconnected. I learn at a 5th grade level. I read and learn at a 5th grade level. I learn, better. Like I give you an idea. Someone says, "Here's your script. Go read it." But for me, someone would have to sit down with me and go over it about 3-4 times till it sinks in. I learn more hands-on than saying, "Here's what you have to do. Go figure it out yourself." So I learn at a slower pace.
Me too, by the way. I can't do a script at all. Keep going. We've got a lot in common.
And I'm on the spectrum of being retarded because I learn at a slower pace. I have panic attacks. I suffer from depression. And I just learn at a slower pace. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm showing you, hey, look at someone who has a high school degree because I was pushed along in high school, who never went to college. But make a long story short, I just got tired trying to find it. Because there's different variations of the story. I use my brother for an inspiration. I use my dad for an inspiration. But I just got tired of sitting at the table listening to everyone saying, "Oh, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know about this. I don't know about that." And they're like, "Oh, well, talk to him. He knows people. She knows people." And they're like, "What about me?" It's like, "What about you? You're not educated. You're not qualified. You piss people off." Like, I guess I do, but I don't think that's a talent. You can't hold down a job. You have diarrhea out of the mouth. And you're not qualified to do anything. So I said, screw it. I'm going to keep it PG. I said, screw it. I'm going to show you I can still amount to something. So I'm turning a weakness into a strength. That's the whole reason I created my own talk show, to show you labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be, and I can still amount to something.
Well, that's great. What you just said is such a great soundbite, and I hope that you and our coordinator, Joseph, work out permission for us to use that in our documentary and stuff if you want. And we'll set up an interview with you also at a later time. I would, the way you state things is interesting. I have to say, based on my extremely limited knowledge of you, I disagree with some of your conclusions, okay? But it really doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that you are very capable of learning. I just published posted on LinkedIn an article that was written by a friend of mine who started the ASCEND, AASCEND, out in Chicago, Mike Bernick. And he wrote an article for Forbes about the big online education giants now moving over to skills instead of the regular one-size-fits-all kind of degrees. And you might look into that. You might look into that too, because I don't hear anybody nowadays really Not because it's politically incorrect, it's because I don't know what it means. It's also politically incorrect when you use the R word as you just did. Because if someone asked me, well, what was this guy Keith Andrew? How would you label him? That word would not enter into my brain, nor would I think of you of having a lesser intellectual development. But that's me, my version of in my brain of what it takes to tune in on your brain. Anxiety is the first chapter in my Ask for Tools book. Why? It rules all of us. It rules all of us. So don't you get discouraged with that. I had the pleasure, and I get chills when I tell this, when I was 21, after I won the Golden Gloves, my Uncle Mo used to work out at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas when Caesar's Palace was the big place out there. And he was a nobody who everybody loved, and he was just such a nice guy. Sinatra would say hello to him, everybody. And because of him, I got to hang out with the former world heavyweight champion, Joe Louis, who back in the day, and I'm going way back, he was it. I mean, Joe Louis was the man. And we would walk around the casino together where Joe Louis worked as a greeter. And I would talk to him, and I still have his autograph from that night. And I said, Champ, I have a confession to make. He said, what, Doc? I said, before every one of my fights, the week before, I get really scared and nervous and almost sick. And then the day before the fight, I want to chicken out of the fight. I don't want to do it. And then the day of the fight, I'm really nervous and scared. And then I get in the ring and I do what I have to do. And Joe Louis, this is a guy who fought for the world championship against a German guy when Adolf Hitler was in the audience. Okay, this is a guy who faced a lot of pressure. He put his arm around me. We're walking along. He said, Doc, we all take fear into the ring with us. It's what you do with it that makes you a champion. And I said to myself, who the heck am I to be hearing this from Joe Louis like that? And that inspired me greatly. And so I don't want you to feel like you're the Lone Ranger. You'll read about a bunch of people if you want. Just look at it. Or you can look at the 2-minute clips for each one. All these people are interviewed. We're talking bipolar, schizophrenic. I don't care what your labels are. You know what I mean? You approach everything in a positive manner, and you come up with positive ways to do the best you can do. And you know what? I'll tell you this, Keith. I failed at a lot of things, man. And I learned a lot more when I failed than I do when I win. Don't get me wrong. I prefer winning. But I've failed in my life at many things, as have most people. And I'm going to tell you one more story. In one of the biggest fights I ever had, I was fighting a guy who was 40-1. And his only loss when I fought him was the fight he had right before me. Before he fought me, it's the fight he had right before he fought me is still ranked number 2 all-time pay-per-view. He's the guy who fought Mike Tyson when Tyson got out of prison. And his name was Peter McNeely. And he was not a great fighter, but he could hit real hard, and he had 40 wins and only 1 loss when I fought him. And the media picked this up. This was like a great story, a real good fight. The 45-year-old doctor against the 28-year-old, however old he was, Peter McNeely. And I was like the good guy donating his purses to children's charity, and the media was making him a bad guy. He's a good guy. And we fought on national TV and everything, and everybody covered it, CNN, ESPN. And let me tell you, he beat me that night every way a man could be beaten. He humiliated me. The better man won that night. And my friends and his friends went out for a drink together after the fight. And his friends were real nice to me. My best friends from Jersey City were very tough on me, asking the bartender to please turn up ESPN as they showed me getting knocked down every 10 seconds, kind of thing. And when I got home, I had a broken nose, I had a cut eye and everything, and I got home, the fight was on the road. And my daughter, Rebecca, who was about 12 at the time, she sat next to me and she was feeling my broken nose, my cut eye, and she said, "Daddy, do you feel bad?" And I told her what I'm going to tell you, Keith. I said, "You listen to me, Rebecca. This might be accidentally one of the most important things I ever tell you." And I said, "I am so disappointed and sad and feel like I let myself down because I lost tonight. And I got humiliated and I feel very disappointed." I said, "But I want you to know I trained as hard as I could. I never quit. I never got counted out. They stopped the fight after I got knocked down 3 times, but I never got counted out. And most importantly, I did everything I could and I never quit and I tried as hard as I could and I got into the ring." And I said, "So I feel disappointed, but I don't feel bad. Do you get the difference?" She said, "Yes." I said, "And what I wish for you, my daughter, and I wish it for you too, Keith Andrew, is a lot of disappointments in life. Because if you don't get disappointed, means you didn't try to do anything. But I don't want you to feel bad. I don't want you to feel I should have got into that arena. I should have tried to make my own show. I should have tried to interview different people. No, you're doing it. And keep doing it. And don't sell yourself short. You have the power to positively influence a lot of people. You have something I don't have, okay? You have your gifts. They're different from mine, okay? And I wouldn't trade places with you, and you probably wouldn't trade places with me. But let me tell you something. Don't sell yourself short. You keep pushing, and you keep getting positive, and you look to make yourself as happy, healthy, productive as you can. Do your best to socialize and build strong social relationships, and avoid the negativity. Do we all get a little bit depressed? Yeah. Do we all have anxiety? Absolutely. Okay? We all do. But remember what Joe Louis told me? And you're a good guy with a lot of potential. You'll do a lot of good things and help a lot of people. And it's a pleasure to have been interviewed with you today.
No, I hope so.
Yes.
Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air. The first one is, how can people follow you on social media? I know you're on LinkedIn, but are you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook?
Yes, the answer is yes, and the answer is also talk to Joseph, because I don't do it myself on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those things. I probably should, but I don't. And I'm trying to do everything I can, but talk to Joseph about that.
All right. What does actually, I do have a couple questions afterwards, but wrapping up, for a word of recommendation, how did you feel when I first approached you? What was your first reaction? And after doing the interview, would you recommend it to other people? And how do you feel now?
Well, I was very impressed from the get-go with you because of your forthrightness, because of your bravery, because you're getting out front, because you're saying, look, my brain's different, but I'm going to do this, and I'm doing this now, okay? So that is how that. I would recommend that you keep doing what you're doing, but add to it. And get somebody you can bounce things off of. And be part of a team also at the same time. So you're not alone, okay? You're not alone. You shouldn't be alone socially. You shouldn't be alone in your business development either, in my view, too. And don't buy, I tell this to the kids at the Boys and Girls Clubs, don't buy society's big lie that things are mutually exclusive. You can do this and do that. You can have your own show like you have, and you can still do online courses, and you can still join a social group to get together. Where do you live, by the way?
Oh, New York.
Whereabouts?
Near West Point, near Woodbury Commons.
Okay, I'm kind of ignorant of the geography there, but you're in. Is that like New York City or
No, New York State.
New York State? So what's the biggest city it's near, or what city are you in?
Central Valley, New York. So I'm about like an hour and a half away from the city.
Okay, all right. So anyway, you go online and you find different groups where you meet live. You meet together. Okay. And there's a lot of positive things, and I'll be glad to discuss them with you at another time. And I'm very email intensive, as you know, and always copy Joseph. And Joseph will help. We'll be glad to have our, and we'll schedule an interview with you also, and we'll be glad to. He'll be glad to fill you in on anything we're doing. So, and however we can help you achieve your goals, we're glad to.
No, absolutely. Do you have a couple questions for you off the air? About wrapping up our interview segment, it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest, and I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.
Thank you very much, Keith Andrew. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much, and keep up your good work. You're inspirational.